All right, well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I am Becky Jakoinski. I am a co-programs director for the Westerly Historical Society, as well as the secretary, and wanted to welcome you this afternoon for Marty Podskoch and his presentation on the Civilian Conservation Corps. This is a collaborative event today, and I want to thank the other historical societies and associations that we partnered with today. Friends of Quonnie Grange, Richmond Historical Society, Hopkinton Historical Association, Quonnie Historical Society, Charlestown Historical Society. So it's been a collaboration with all of these associations and societies, and hopefully it's going to be one of many. And I'm going to hand it over to Marty and have him get started. So thank you for coming.
Thank you very much for coming on this peaceful day. I bet you we never thought we'd be coming today. And I thought, oh boy, am I crazy, but it kept on moving the other way, and Maine is enjoying it. There was just a little rain in Wickford today, just for about 2 minutes or something like that. But I'm very happy to be here, especially since your town had a CCC camp. I'm originally from Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania area. Well, I went to King's College and studied history and government, and I loved that. And I was supposed to be a history teacher for high school, but no job, so I went to New Jersey, got a job, and I taught 4th grade, then 7th and 8th grade history, got a master's in reading, did remedial reading. My school where I was teaching, the middle school, was named Jonas Salk Middle School. So I got to meet Jonas Salk. So I met my wife, whose father was a dairy farmer from Middlefield, Connecticut, went out to New York State, Pine Plains. Then his last farm was in Oneko. And if you know the Rhode Island, Connecticut border there by Sterling, that's where he was a dairy farmer for 3 years. That's where I got into farming. I had to learn how to cleaning the manure, etc. like that. And so it was great to marry a farmer's daughter. Somebody asked me how I got interested in the CCCs. It was all because somebody had some photos of CCCs in the Adirondacks, and then I became gung-ho on this. And this year is the 90th anniversary of the CCCs, very special year. Originally, when CCC boys got older in the 70s and 80s, they said, let's get together, okay? And so they formed the National Association of the Civilian Conservation Corps alumni, NACA. And in almost every state, they had 1, 2, or 3 different clubs. In Rhode Island, I forgot where it was, maybe near Providence or something, there was a NACA club. In Connecticut, they had one in the east of the state and the west part of the state. Danbury and the guys from Norwich, and they were the ones that helped start the camp in the museum in Stafford Springs. So CCC Legacy took over, and I am now on the board. I got interested because a CCC guy, he told me about how they had these get-togethers. They went to Red Rocks. Every year they go to a different state, and they go and look at different projects that CCC boys have done all over the United States. So I joined, plus gets a newspaper 4 times a year. So I'm going to pass these around. Just take one per family. If you're not interested after you read it, especially if you're joining, it's only $20 a year. But we're the last people to keep alive the CCCs. So our organization, what we do is we bought this mold. It's called the CCC Workers Statue, And almost all the states in the United States have one. Connecticut has two. One is right over the border in Voluntown, okay? It's called Patchogue State Forest. And that's the statue that's there, okay? We also have one in Killingworth. But certain states like Rhode Island, Vermont, do not have a statue. So hopefully, maybe some historical society or people could get together to raise $24,000 and they could have a statue. I think would be great having one right here in Burlingame State Park. So when I retired in 2001, I was a seventh grade reading teacher. And so I used to have authors come to my school, and I try to get my kids interested in reading and writing by meeting a lot of writers, but I became a writer myself. So so far I've got 11 books done, but it all started when I visited a fire tower on Hunter Mountain. Has anybody visited a fire tower? Okay. Now, the trouble is, I don't like heights. But, okay, I visited Hunter Mountain, but I probably only got about this high, okay? And, it was October, and it was snowing, and the observer came out of the cabin. He said, "Hey, guys, you want to warm up?" We sat down by his fire, had a glass of water, and he told us it's the greatest job meeting people from all over the world. If you've ever been to Hunter Mountain, they have all these festivals and hiking to the fire tower. So I told the publisher, somebody should write a book. So a publisher called me up and he said, "Marty, they're trying to save the towers in the Catskills." And this is where I lived, in a little town called Delhi. And Cooperstown is up here. Oneonta, I don't know if you ever heard, there's Albany and Binghamton. So that was my first book, so I got that one done. Then I went up to the Adirondacks and I did the 57 towers, the men and women who were up in the towers, the stories about the guys and up in wooden towers, because they started in 1909. Then a comic book illustrator said, "Marty, let's do a book together." So I did sort of like Believe It or Not, picture stories about the Adirondacks. And then somebody had these pictures of CCCs in the Adirondacks. So I said, I'm going to go from the men and women up in the towers watching for smoke to the men who built up our state and national parks. So that's what I was in that quest. And I started going around. I didn't even know anything about CCC legacy until I came to Connecticut and met a retired CCC boy, and he told me about it, and then I joined, and then I got hooked on it. Okay, so here are the Adirondacks. Anybody go to the Adirondacks, New York State? One? Where do you like to go?
My wife's family has a cabin in Old Forge.
Old Forge. I was there 1 month ago.
Beautiful. At
the library, yeah. Okay, so then that book came out. Then I came to Connecticut. What the hell am I driving all the way to the Adirondacks when I could do Connecticut? So I did one. It took me 6 years to do this one, but I got that done. And I traveled all over giving talks just like this, and the people were in the audience, shared their stories. Then a guy said, "Marty, all I have is my father's picture, Rhode Island CCC camp. Can you help me find it?" So, I figured, what the heck am I going to do? I said, you could send for information, and if anybody wants to find out their fathers or grandfathers or uncles, I could give you one of these sheets. All the records are in St. Louis, and you could get your dad, father-in-law, anybody, CCC records. So finally found out, I gave a talk in Westerly Library, and how many know Al Kleiberg when he was alive? Okay, just one person. Okay, he was the head of the Historical Society. He called me up, he said, "Marty, the state is asking me to write a whole thing about CCCs and what effect they had on our camping areas, etc. So could you be able to go and help me find out where these camps were?" So in one day, we visited all 7 camps in one day, because Rhode Island, is small. not like the Adirondacks, and I'm doing Vermont, I'm trying to find those 34. And I'm also working on Massachusetts with 68 camps. So we did find his dad's, and it was in West Gloucester. Where's our West Gloucester man? West? Greenwich. Sorry, got the G's. Okay. West Greenwich. He's the woodsman. Okay. And we found that it was right on Route 3. So I found those, and these were all the camps. 2, 4, 6, 7 different camps. And everything was based on population. Okay. So the larger states had the most CCC boys, whereas the smaller states with less population, like Rhode Island, had less. Now, your first question, what state had the largest population in 1933 when Roosevelt started the CCCs? And you got to raise your hand now. This is 7th grade. I was there for 36 years. Yes?
New Jersey.
New Jersey, good try. No.
I'm going to say California.
Good try. Nope.
New York.
New York, and your first name? Bob? Okay, Bob, 10 points. So therefore, they had every year at least 67 each year CCC camps. Now, some camps only lasted 6 months. Okay? The work was done, or Roosevelt was trying to keep the budget down, and he said, we got to close so many camps. Okay, like around, I think it was 35 and 36 when he's running for re-election. Okay? One camp where the poet Frost, Robert Frost, in Vermont. No, Vermont. Does anybody know that town? 10 points, because I can't remember. It's right above, well, that town, they built the camp, but because they didn't have the money, they had to take the whole buildings down. Never lasted, okay? So now, that's why you only had 7 total. And some of them didn't last that long, too, of those total there. I think you could, I don't have the ends. Now, it all happened during the Depression, when Roosevelt was the president, and people just didn't have jobs, okay? 25% of the people were unemployed. So you had people just wandering the streets, boys and girls quitting school, 8th grade, 7th grade, 6th grade. I had one guy, 4th grade. He quit school because he had to help his parents. Okay, like Hassan, he said, how many were in your family? 7. My mother had 8 sisters and 1 brother. Okay, my ancestors came from Slovakia and Lithuania. Okay, Eastern Europe. They came to Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania area, and they worked in the coal mines. Just like, you have a lot of the Haitians, the Puerto Ricans, Mexicans, they're doing all the rough jobs, okay? Just like my ancestors and your ancestors. You start at the bottom, and you hope better for your kids and grandkids. So in 1932 election, Roosevelt was elected. Now, for 10 points, who could tell me who did Roosevelt beat by raising your hand? Yes?
Herbert Hoover.
Herbert Hoover, and your name?
Bill.
Bill's got 10. Okay? And he proposed to start a civilian conservation corps. Now, what office did he have before he became president? What big office did he have in New York State?
Secretary of Navy?
So he was secretary. Wait, the lady behind you?
Was he the governor?
The governor. What's your first name?
Joyce.
Joyce. And he did projects when he was the governor, planting trees and putting people to work. I haven't been to Hyde Park in a long time, but he was really into trees, just like his cousin Teddy. Teddy set so much land for national parks. Okay, now, his first 100 days, he went to Congress, and the law was called the Emergency Conservation Work Act, because it was an emergency. These people didn't have jobs, and it had to do with Conservation Work Act. Later on, we just call it the CCC. But he went to Congress on March 27th, and then 4 days later, it passed the House and the Senate, just like our government today. So he had all these departments, Roosevelt, working together, Labor Department, War Department, Agriculture, to be able to get this program going. And if you go back, he wanted 250,000 men, 18 to 25, single and unemployed and out of school, in camp in 2 months. Who could be able to, for 10 points, give these guys in a camp food, clothing, shelter, and medical care? Raise your hand. Tom. The military. Tom, the president. Still the president? 10 points. No extra points for presidents. So who could give them? We got that done. The Army. And here is the head of the CCC camps. He was a labor union guy, and Roosevelt was a smart politician. The labor unions were saying, you can't be giving these guys money, other people are starving. But he hired a labor man, bingo, it passed, okay? Now, for 10 points, raise your hand, how much were these boys paid a month? If you could, yes?
I think it was $30.
$30, Hassan gets 10 points. $30, $1 a day. And that's why the Army was getting $21 a month. Now, the Department of Labor in all the states, they had to choose, who was going to be, they had to be poor, on relief. So we have 48 states. In every state, the Department of Labor was going to choose. Now, who was the person for 10 points in charge of the Labor Department of the United States? Good. So Frances Perkins, she was the first woman in a cabinet, presidential cabinet. And she was the brains, Social Security, okay? The 40-hour week. Look at all the different things that she put into his brain, and he, got passed because of her. Okay? They had their physical exams. They were given World War I clothing because they had to feed and dress them quickly. And in my travels, I can't even remember who gave me this, but later on, they were so ill-clad, I think it was around 36 or 37, Roosevelt said, we got to have these guys wearing something nice when they go to dances, Friday night, Saturday night in Charlestown or Westerly, or when they're hitchhiking home, if they were still in Rhode Island, not too bad. So I got this. I'll pass this on this side. I hope nobody's allergic to wool. One lady I had, she says, I can't touch it. It's got wool. And here's a hat that I got. So they would wear these clothes, but you could see they didn't wear this when they were physical requirements. Look at this. You had to be a certain height, certain weight, but look at the last one. They had to have at least 3 serviceable natural masticating teeth above and below. They didn't have doctors, dentists. They couldn't afford going to dentists. We go every 6 months to get our teeth cleaned. If you had a tooth, Dad would get the pliers out or the doorknob. Remember that one? Putting the string on it, slam the door shut. Okay. The boys were assigned camps, and the Army was in charge. So they were either shipped by train, truck, or bus. Okay? They came here, and like Hassan's one brother, or both brothers who went to Oregon, can you imagine these poor boys going on a train, seeing the whole United States, and, poor boys, they'd never, unbelievable, and got to be in Oregon. Can you believe it? Not only did the Rhode Island boys work here, but they were shipped out, okay? Plymouth, Vermont, Ricker Mills, anybody ever go up that one? And New Hampshire. And look at this, Fall River, not too far from Rhode Island. I was surprised seeing all Rhode Island boys in Fall River. Okay? And this is from a yearbook. If anybody gets a chance, I've got it with the Burlingame page. But this gives you some idea. I made it larger. If you could see, there was a Westerly in one of these. Okay? Then the one at Ricker Mills, Bristol, Lakewood. Where's Lakewood?
Warwick.
Is it in Warwick?
Warwick.
Wow, okay. Then here's the East Brewster one. This is a 1937 yearbook. Now these boys, I forgot to tell you, they would sign up for 6 months. Usually went from April to October, then another group October to April. Those poor boys that signed up in the winter, they had some rough times, you know, especially if you're in Montana, Vermont, but they kept working, okay? So you could sign up for 6 months, and after 6 months, you could sign up again. Up to 2 years, you could be in the CCC. Okay, so there they are, and you see everything neat and orderly, just like our children keep their rooms and grandkids. Do you ever see those rooms? Whoa. Okay. How many states? We know that. Where are the CC camps located now? Now, not only the 48 states, but 6 territories. If you could raise your hand, what territory do you think was one of the territories that there were CCC camps besides the 48 states? Yes?
I'm going to guess Alaska.
Alaska, and your first name?
Joyce.
Joyce? Ooh, 20 points. Okay. Name another one besides...
Puerto Rico.
What's your first name?
Dave.
Dave, Puerto Rico's correct. How many have been to Puerto Rico and gone up El Yunque, the rainforest, this road, and the buildings, cement building, all built by the CCC. So you can imagine how huge this program was. And the thing about it only lasted 9 years. That's why NACA, those alumni guys, kept going to Congress. Please start the CCC again. Start it up again. They do have it in Vermont. It's called YCC. Montana, California, a couple states have it. 5 types of camps. There were white camps. Remember, this is the 30s. Are people prejudiced today? Yes. Just, watch TV or read stuff. There were just black camps. And boy, the southern states didn't want any of them. And they said, no, we're not going to have any black camps. All of New England was integrated. There were blacks and whites, but because there weren't 200 Afro-American boys for one camp. Then we had the bonus army come in 1932. 10 points. Who was the president in 1932? Raise your hand if you think you know. Yes?
Hoover.
Hoover is correct. And your first name? Okay. So he's the president, okay? And they came, please, World War I veterans, please give us our bonus. We're supposed to have it in 46. But in 32, we don't have jobs. They came, they marched, they had their tents. What did Hoover do? 10 points. So look at this. They sent, and MacArthur and the soldiers shot up to some of these camps. They had their children and families there. And they said, don't come back. Okay, 1933, does that stop the bonus army? They came again. Now, who does Roosevelt send to deal with the bonus army? Eleanor. He's a politician. Now, sometimes you have a president, you have protesters, you know, they'll send the soldiers after him and everything like that. But not Roosevelt. He said, he sent Eleanor. She drove up in her limousine, sat down. What's the problem, vet? No job. I'm going to tell my husband. So he said, I'm going to start veterans camps. Look at here. Right down the road, Arcadia. At one, in 1939, they sent veterans guys 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years old, they were at the camp. Just look at the picture, how old these guys were. Now, every year, every month, they had a newspaper, these camps. Now, I believe it or not, I've got all my notes, and I've got Arcadia, our president. Where is she? I've got all my notes, and I've got camp newspapers in here for your historical society, because I got to clean out the attic. I took all my CCC stuff from, where the heck was it? Connecticut, and I went to the archives in Hartford. They were so happy, you know. My fire tower books, and I forgot to give Tom his. Now, Westerly, I got to find out. Maybe I left them at home, Tom, but if I do, I'll give you what I have. They called it the Westerly camp. Was it in Westerly? No. It was in Charlestown. Used to be Westerly. The Army called it the nearest post office and railroad. So the Army was dealing with Westerly for their post or the mail, and also bringing stuff by rail. So you look in the book, it's the Westerly camp. You look all around Westerly, it's not, it's in Charlestown. Okay? So that's confusing when I'm doing this research. Okay? There were also Native American camps, okay? But these guys went home every day. We had a commanding officer. He had a first or second lieutenant. Then they said, these kids only have 8th grade education average. This guy here, he went to Harvard. No job. He goes down to the camp. He's got a plan education at nighttime, okay? Different classes, mechanics, forestry, whatever. Photography. Some of these camps, they had their own dark room. Imagine that. Then they gave them nice clothes, okay? Now they had socks, shoes that didn't have holes in them. Remember how they'd put the cardboard in there? One boy in New York State said, Marty, went to school, we didn't even have a coat in the winter. They put newspapers inside the shirt to keep them warm. Now, they also had an Army doctor. He might be in charge, like Tom's father. He might have had 1 or 2 or 3 camps that he would supervise, and they would have one boy. He would stay there all the time, to, give basic first aid. But if it's an emergency, they would call Dr. Tom O'Connell, Fort Adams. Okay. How many have taken the tour of this? If you haven't, it is awesome. Okay. Now, life at the camp. Now, right here in Burlingame here. Okay. First, that in 33, in July, in June, these boys lived in Army tents, and they had to wait until the camp buildings were made. This is the Voluntown camp. The only thing left are these 2 pillars. Okay? And we do have stuff left over here in Burlingame. Beautiful thing. So sometimes, too, the boys would help in the construction of the buildings. And you know what? It's interesting. Do you see the diagonal boards? They didn't have plywood. Because I remember my father helping my uncle do flooring, and it was all diagonal. Okay? So they woke up at 6 o'clock, trumpet blowing, exercise, breakfast, all the food they wanted, too. So these boys gained, on average, 12 pounds in their time there. Then they would work for 8 hours. Now, the Army had the boys for 16 hours, but 8 hours, the Conservation Department of Rhode Island, they had a superintendent. He was an engineer, and he would plan the projects over here at Burlingame and at Hope Valley. Then, say this guy, George. George is a logger down here in Charlestown. And his wife had 13 children. And she said, George, get off your dupa. You know what your dupa is? Yes. Get off your dupa and get down there. I got these starving kids. So George runs down there, gets a job, and he's working with boys doing work in the forest. Now another guy here, say he's from Italy, okay? A lot of the Italians were very good masons, so they would do the work building chimneys, fireplaces, building the dams, etc. So these guys were called LEMs, local experienced men, and they were getting paid $60, $70 a month, okay? And they would take a squad in a truck, 8 to 14 boys, and they would do projects, okay? So they had these boys for 8 hours, and they had to do the work that the superintendent has planned for them. Now this is the camp right across the border in Connecticut. It's called Union. You ever go up Route 84 going towards Worcester? There's a restaurant, Free Books. You know, the orange roof there? Okay. And so this was the camp, and you could see the captain and his first, second lieutenant. Look at the squads, boys going. Now they're away from camp. Some of the boys stayed. They were good at typing. So they would just do the office work. So these boys, first of all, they had to work on building the camp. Roads, help with the buildings, forestry work, fire hazard reduction. That's when the guys and girls, mostly guys, throwing out their cigarettes, throwing out their cigars. There was a lot of tinder along the side of the road. You had fires. Or hunters, they didn't know about putting out the fire. Okay, wildlife management, recreation development. Look at the beautiful park we have right here in Charlestown. Emergency assistance. When the 38 hurricane came here, the boys were sent to search the beaches for dead bodies. And one guy there in Westerly, that's what his father had to do, searching for the dead bodies. Okay, so, or a lost hunter. Planting billions of trees, not millions, billions of trees all over. They would also, anybody ever hike and see water holes like this? Whenever there would be a spring, they would line them with stone, and then if there was a fire in the woods, they knew where the water hole was that they could fill up their Indian tanks or pumps. Oh, they also built fire towers here, too, in Rhode Island. They had the Indian tanks. Then these insects. What they had for stopping the caterpillars, they'd climb up the trees, especially in the winter time, and look for these egg masses. There would be thousands of eggs in these nests, and they had creosote in a can, and they would paint them with creosote to kill them. But what could it have killed? The CCC boy, because creosote is carcinogenic, causes cancer. I was talking, oh boy, in one town northwest, oh boy, this guy, he said he worked for the town road department, and they had these bridges made out of like railroad ties that had been creosote, and he was crawling underneath there working. It was dripping on his head. He showed me the pictures. He had a hat on, I don't want to see. He had cancer. They said they have to scrape off the cancer once or twice a year because, cancer. But that's what they were using. And also they would have these creosote tanks for coating the guardrails, the poles. Some of these poles are still in existence. You ever go on these country roads and you see these old telephone poles? Yeah. They use creosote. That's why they've lasted. Doing stuff like this, rip-wrapping along the stream. The park, some of these old, on Route 3. Starts with a D. Dolly. What's the name of it? Dolly. There was a campsite on Route 3. Remember that? They had this big building, and it just caved in from not using it because Route 95, other roads became more popular. people don't go and stop and have picnics anymore. It's a shame. Okay. Swimming areas like we have here at the park, 36 flood, then the 38 hurricane. These boys were called in to clean up. How many have been in a flood and know the muck that they had to clean up? Isn't it terrible? If you go up on Escaheg Road, you know, ever go up that way? Escaheg? And one of these side roads, they have one just like this. It is still in place 90 years, the drainage part. Anybody ever go up there? They do these motorcycles jumping up boulders, bouldering. Anybody heard of that? No? They built roads, built dams, and they needed gravel. So they would just go to sometimes, I met some lady there in Richmond. They had a dairy or had a farm, and they sold gravel to the CCC boys. Took a lunch at 12 to 1. They worked 8 hours a day. And 5 o'clock, should be 6 o'clock, they had supper, and they could have family style, you know, where they put the bowls, etc. like that. There's one guy said he was in the camp, and they had pork chop. They had mashed potatoes, everything they wanted. But the sergeant is saying, let's have a prayer. And he said, Marty, I'm standing there looking to see what is the largest pork chop I'm going to grab as soon as the prayer is over. Imagine that, these poor boys, they had nothing, you know? And you could see all the Providence boys. Boy, they had so many people, their quota was a lot larger. Uh-oh. Okay. Then they would go back to their barracks, shoot the bull, talk about the girls they met last week at the dance there in Charlestown or Westerly. And then they would go to the rec hall. Now, this was the place, look at this. They'd have a fireplace, you can't see it here, but they'd have a canteen. Now, see that boy there? He didn't plant trees. All he did was order the soda, the cigarettes, etc. And he would open at night and on weekends. That's all he had to do. And for his 6 months. So then they would have this paper money. Say they came to the camp, you had no money, and you wanted to buy some cigarettes. So the captain would give you a book, $1 worth of this paper money. And then on the weekends, and I'm looking at this place and I'm thinking, I wouldn't be surprised if this was used by the CCC Burlingame camp for basketball. Sometimes they would ask the high school, could we use to play basketball during basketball? But I was up in Bethel, Vermont, and the people said, yes, the boys used the town hall building. So that might have been the Grange or dances. This was a good place. Sometimes they would also go across the border into Sterling if they had a Grange there. KP duty. Then on Sunday, they would take the boys, if they wanted to, go to church there in Westerly, wherever. Then at nighttime, they would give classes. And if you passed, you would have a certificate. So you could be able to use this when you got out to help you get a job. If you had typing or whatever, mechanics. They had to teach these boys how to drive. So these boys came from Providence. They had no driver's license. Now remember, these are 18. Later on, they lowered the age to 17 to 28 because it got harder to be able to find boys. So they had to teach them. And look at each camp. They would have 15 maybe trucks. Some would be these rack trucks, and the boys would have a bench on either side. And in the winter, they would have a canvas top. They had dump trucks. So that's all these boys did, was be in charge of a truck for 6 months. And they signed up again. If they did a good job, 6 months. And then they went out. They'd have their record, all how they were as a driver, helped them become truck drivers. Some were cooks and got jobs there. Mechanics. Their camp newspapers. I got to show you this. Here is a Stafford Springs camp newspaper. Then a lady from Connecticut said her dad was in Massachusetts, and he went up to Windsor, Vermont, the Ascutney camp. Gooseberry, they were the middle person. They're the host. They were the host for this fungus. And when the wind blew from the currant bushes, it carry up to the white, I love my white pine trees, and kill them. So they had the CCC boys in the spring ripping up currant bushes and gooseberries within 900 feet of white pine trees. This is the egg mass that they would climb, trying to put the creosote. Climbing, they would band the trees too with burlap. Look at the fire towers they built right here. This Escahega is in really bad shape. I hope, in other states they restore these towers and people frequent them, but Rhode Island does not do that. Maybe somebody could get the... And these roads that they built also had to do with specifications. Federal specifications. They had manuals, mechanics, whatever. You had to do this certain way. Everything was by the book. Okay, how many have been up to George Washington State Park and seen this building they built? The CCC boys even put a statue or a monument for the CCCs. That's about the only thing in the state to honor. Look at what they built. Isn't this unbelievable? Now, this was the Primrose Camp that Rogers' grandfather was the Army captain. And in North Smithfield, they came here. There's a little stream comes this way. They put a dam. It caused the water to come in here and then go out. And behind it, they made a ski jump. They had 2,000 people coming just to see the skiing there. They would take the logs and make lumber. Okay, look at this. Mesquamicut, wiped out. And then they'd be searching for the bodies there. Look at that. Now, Fort Adams. These are all the places, mostly in the western part of the state, where the CCC came. Okay, there they are. This is the yearbook I got. Arcadia, Wyoming, Hopkinton. Oh, here's the, I got to go fast. This is the Arcadia camp. They even had a model. Here's where the boys for that camp were. There's one, DeLuca. That's my daughter-in-law's last name. There they are getting the gravel. They didn't have front-end loaders. They had to quickly load it by hand, and they'd have races to see who could be loaded the fastest. Telephone lines, fought gypsy moths, fire, blister rust. Okay, then at first all they had were shovels, sledgehammers, and wheelbarrows and picks, 1933 and 34. Then they got cleat tractors, okay? Doctors, education classes. Look at the classes. This was in the Arcadia, the Hopkinton place there. Look at all the different varieties of things. Leathercraft, too. So some of them, they could get credit for elementary or high school diplomas. Public speaking. Boxing was really popular. Basketball teams, where did they go? Let's see. Basketball traveled to Gloucester, George Washington Camp, and Foresters Hall. Look at this. These are the names of the administrators. Okay, and this is all in the book, too. So I got to go fast now. Oh, look at that. This is where we are, right? They got together with the girls, NYA camp, and had dances. The girls taught them dancing and other things. Look at fighting fires. 24 acres. They had a place, too, a little place where they raised trees, too, a nursery. I got to go fast. Nurseries. Okay, poultry classes. Helping the clean. Look at that disaster for the Hurricane 38. And then I told you the veterans. Look at that. They didn't have black and white. They had color. okay? Because these guys were 30s, 40s, 50s, 60 years old. They were good writers, you know, artists, etc. Okay, fire suppression. Peterson's Sawmill, anybody heard of that? In Lewis City, North Kingstown, State Nursery near Wood River. I passed the Wood River today, cleaned up after the hurricane. Look at bingo. Wednesday, camp, they like their bingo. Okay, and you can't see this, but they're real, boy. And they could stay more than 2 years. They could stay the 9 years if they wanted to. And they got to keep the money because they were, you know, and probably a lot of them were bachelors. A lot of them were shell-shocked. You know how we have PTSD? Can you imagine in those trench warfare? That, you know, so a lot of them were just alcoholics. One guy up in Adirondack said, Marty, I was in charge of the camp, you know, work. I got there Monday, ready to work. I looking around, all these guys are just lying around, drunker than a skunk. He said to the captain, what am I going to get with these guys working? He says, you're not going to get any work out of them today. They've been partying this weekend. But they had it rough. Okay, look at the ads. You know any of those places? Sherman's? Huh?
Westerly Dairy.
Is still going? No. Okay. Dr. Everett Westcott? Optometrist, let's go back. How about the Dial Diner? Pinecrest Inn? Sherman's? Now, this is where it is. How many, you know you're going up to where that Indian Museum is? On the left, there's the one building left. It's the administration building, and behind it is a fire tower. Westerly, okay, here's built roads, trails all around the park there, campsites, picnic areas, disbanded in 42. And look at here. After the war, it was used to house naval personnel, the CCC camp. You know how there was the Air Force Base here? Army camp, arrest stop for British and Navy personnel. Wait, you know what this thing? Prisoner of war camp, too. In the Adirondacks, they had the Germans. And way up in Watertown, they had the Italians. Okay? They were kept, and they had a fence around there. So they must have had a fence here, too. There's an aerial view of the camp. And it's not where you go camping. Route 1 is here. You take up this road, and then they had a circular. You know where the circular thing is there? And the camp is there, and there's the water. They made trails around there. It used to be Kimball Wildlife Sanctuary, and then they kept adding on until finally they had 3,100 acres. Here's the Westerly camp. Now, these would be the leaders, the $45 guys, and these are the 36ers. These are the technical personnel, like the LEM guys. I know I saw Tarbox, one of those places. Anybody know that Tarbox family? Somebody knew that. And there, the guy in Westerly, his dad was right here, and he taught carpentry. Lean-tos. There's the camp, 34. Does anybody know McDonald? John McDonald? Okay, and look at the nice park you have there. So they thinned the woods, planted trees, cleared acres, and even Kingston eradicated gooseberries, constructed water holes, gypsy moths, cut telephone poles and lighting poles in a cedar swamp, rafted the poles to the Watchung Pond, built the mess hall, rec hall. Look at the legacy you have there. How many have been to this? Shelter, built by the CCC, and it's still beautiful shape.
Look at the fireplace on that.
Look at the chimneys. Isn't it something? That's what I mean. They had that LEM guy. The boys would be getting the rocks, you know, cleaning them out, mixing up the cement, but he was guiding the whole project. So it was, you know, look, even the base, the logs that they got from the nearby forest. And that's the road that goes to a road here in development, and then Route 1 is down there. But look at the logs. And everything had to be just right according to, national regulations. Then World War II came. We no longer needed them in the woods. They were never officially closed. But if you look at the whole thing, 3 million men served from 33 to 42. They gained an average of 12 pounds in weight. 2 billion, and this was all paid by the federal government. Look at these. Did anybody ever go to Lincoln Park in Lincoln? Wait, what's it called? Lincoln Park? Lincoln Woods. I could not believe it. They have 4 fireplaces together in one. Anybody ever see that one? Go to Lincoln Woods. It's gorgeous. They did a lot of work there. That's when people would stop, on a Saturday or Sunday and have a picnic at a roadside rest. No more. Go to McDonald's. Okay? There's the legacy. Look at these. Still working. There's where they do the trails. They even do it with motorcycles. And look at nationally. How many been to Denver? It's called Red Rocks. There's these 2 red rocks and 10,000 seats built by the CCC. Anybody go there? I saw Steve Miller Band and Joe Cocker before he died. Because this is what it looked like originally. There was just a little stage where they would have Easter ceremony. And Denver said, please, could you come and do something? Look at, they had to carve it out and make it to cement. This is just one of many. How about Skyline Drive in Virginia? And here's the historical CCC Museum. Hassan and his family went there last week. Did you like it?
Yeah, very nice.
But look at the wood pile they had in the olden days. The boxing ring. The 5 barracks. And this might have been the rec hall. Wherever you see the nice big chimney, that was the rec hall. And this is Route 190 going to Enfield. And this is going to Union. So if you want to go there, it's still open until, there it is, 10 to 3, weekends. And hopefully, if I'm alive and the energy of my wife doesn't kill me or divorce me. And this is where I live, on Lake Pukatapag, and I'm also with the Conservation Lake Commission. We've done aeration, where you have bubblers now. We also got this new thing that's called some kind of flocks. They put it in, and it grabs the phosphates that the algae lives on and carries it right down to the bottom. And this is my family, my wife Lynn, our baby Ryan married Jenna, and tomorrow I'm going to be playing with Anna and Lily and Luke in Reading. And here we are on our 50th anniversary last year. It's $600 a night at the Inn at Castle Hill. And on the cover is the Inn at Castle Hill. I got it from this guy who does all these sailing pictures. He has a gallery down there on Main Street. So $600 a night, I could afford lunch. We had lunch, and I told her, Lynn, on the 75th, we're going to stay at the Inn at Castle Hill. I'll be able to afford it. So thank you so much for coming and having me.